I conducted my interview with Dr. Joseph Spillane. Currently, Dr. Spillane is the Associate Dean for Student Affairs. He also used to be the chair of the History Department here at UF. I met Dr. Spillane through the Sophomore Leadership Seminar. The Sophomore Leadership Seminar is a program put on by the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, for which I am a participant in this year. One week, we had him as a guest speaker, and he gave a presentation on failure. He talked about how we can learn from failure, how we can grow from it, and how we can truly be upfront about it. I really connected to his presentation on a personal level, and I truly believe that I grew from it. For this reason, I believe that he would be a great person to get in contact for a potential interview for this project. That being said, I contacted him via email, and he remembered me from the presentation he gave, fortunately. So, he was happy to help. So him and I scheduled a time to meet up in his office to conduct the interview. Throughout the interview, I gained a few different perceptions of Dr. Spillane. The interview was held in his office, so based off this location alone, I was able to learn a lot about him just based off the way he had his office set up and some of the details I found around the room. Around the office, he had bookshelves full of countless texts on various subjects, whether it was history because of his involvement in history, sports, leadership, or anything that intrigued him in general. This detail contributed to my perception of him being a well-rounded, knowledgeable, and competent individual from when I first met him at the Sophomore Leadership Seminar. Based off stories he told me and failures he recognized during the interview, he seemed to be an extremely self-aware individual. When I first met him at the Sophomore Leadership Seminar, he began to tell us a story about a time when he failed when he first became the chair of the History Department, and during our interview, he expanded upon this story when I asked him more about it. He told me when he first became chair of the History Department, he was offered the opportunity to increase the stipends given to his new and incoming graduate students. Seeing this as a wonderful opportunity, he did not hesitate to seize it. However, he did not take into account the way his current graduate students would react as a result, since they could not receive an increase in their stipends as well, due to the lack of money in the budget. Within a matter of days, he began receiving angry emails and phone calls from his current graduate students. They felt as though they were left in the dark throughout the decision-making process. As a result, he called a meeting with his current graduate students. He admitted to them that he made a mistake, and he vowed to be more upfront with them going forward. This experience taught him a lot, such as the value of communication and reflection. Based on our discussions during the interview, he emphasized taking the time to reflect and take a step back. He was very open about his failures, and he emphasized that leaders must act in the same way. As he states, nobody can work for a person who does not think he or she has ever failed. It's just unrealistic. And his sharing of his story with me really contributes to the fact that he really believes in this idea. Additionally, he really seemed like a relationship-oriented leader. When I first met him at our seminar, he took the time to learn everyone's names and a little bit about us. This showed us that he truly cared about us as individuals. Based off our interview, it seems as though he implements the same attitude with his team. He told me that leaders must emphasize being a part of the team and not the head of the team. He told me that whenever he introduces one of his team members, he always states that they work with him, not for him. Everyone works with him, regardless of their status within the hierarchy. And this idea in general really contributes to Dr. Spillane's style as a relationship-oriented leader. During the interview, Dr. Spillane brought up a few characteristics that he deemed the most important for leaders. In particular, I asked him what his top 3 were. First, he brought up communication. He stated that as leaders, we often fail to understand why it is so important. He stated, it is not about public speaking or writing, which we often confuse it with. Rather, it is about the flow of information. People have to understand why you are doing something and what you are doing. He believed that he learned this the tough way with his experiences with the graduate students that I previously discussed. Second, he brought up empathy. He said that people in leadership roles need to be able to empathize with the situations around them to be able to understand where others are coming from. In addition, he emphasized that followers have to be treated as people and not just a resource, which he believes that current leaders have sometimes confused. Third, and one that he really emphasized, is responsibility. He said that when you are in a leadership position, nobody wants to hear how difficult it is. Leaders should never complain or explain to others how hard or tiring leadership is, and he truly doesn't understand why a leader would. To put things in perspective, especially with his history background, he gave me an example. Dwight D. Eisenhower, one of his favorites. He told me that Dwight D. Eisenhower wrote a letter before the Normandy invasion. Within the letter, Eisenhower stated that if the Normandy invasion were to fail, the responsibility would fall all on his shoulders. He never tried to explain the stress and hardship of being in charge. And Dr. Spillane believed this is a great lesson for leadership, and he actually modeled part of his own leadership style around it. After the interview concluded, I gained a few different perceptions of Dr. Spillane. Throughout the interview, we discussed a few topics that I was actually able to relate to some of the applications and theories we have discussed in our class thus far. For one, Dr. Spillane appeared to express the characteristics of an authentic leader. As I discussed previously, he emphasized self-awareness. In addition, he believes that he learned a lot from his conflict with his graduate students, and from what I perceived, I believe that he has more of a balanced processing system when he's making his decisions. He emphasizes considering the impacts on all people in his decision-making and not allowing his biases to interfere. This also speaks to more of an internalized moral perspective that he expresses. Relating to the story, he promised to be more of an upfront leader about his decision-making, which contributes to his relational transparency. Additionally, he expresses characteristics from leader-member exchange theory. He told me that he meets with his whole team every 1 or 2 weeks, but he also has a specific group in his team that he will meet often on informal occasions. Sometimes he says he'll just walk right in their office and ask for advice on decisions or tasks. This concept relates to the idea of dyadic relationships with an in-group and an out-group. Clearly, the informal meetings that he has with a specific group of people, they are known as his in-group. The team in general has other out-group members who are not necessarily as involved. Furthermore, Dr. Spillane also expressed hints of servant leadership. He emphasized to me that leaders must derive satisfaction from helping others and want to put others first. This statement is very similar to Greenleaf's definition of servant leadership, in which he states that a leader must want to serve first, then lead. There is a clear similarity between these two statements. Throughout the interview, Dr. Spillane made a few key statements that allowed me to understand leadership on more of a practical level. First, he told me that leadership is about cultivating relationships with others and sustaining those relationships. He told me that sometimes he does things for others that he does not necessarily find to be worthwhile because he wants to maintain the relationship with them. He truly emphasized how relationship building is an integral part of the leadership process. However, forming relationships isn't about avoiding conflict. He told me that conflict-averse leaders cannot get anything done. You must face conflict straight on, is what he told me. But also, he believes leadership is trial and error. He believes you get better at it as you go along, you listen to feedback, and you learn from it over the years. Experience helps, he says. This plays into the argument of whether you believe leadership is a trait-driven gift or whether anybody can learn it through experience and practice. He believes that experience comes into play in every activity and leadership is no different. He ended the interview with a final quote. He told me, "You can play basketball or you can make quilts, but no matter what you do, you will always get better at it, and leadership is no different."